Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Max McAllister from Traxxion Dynamics. Lots of you have been following videos I've been doing about the new Honda Goldwing, which is the kind of the high-tech flagship of the motorcycle industry. But there are millions and millions of models of motorcycles that are more moderately priced, and those bikes have suspension systems that are frequently far less sophisticated than the Honda Goldwing. And in the modern era of motorcycles, there's a couple kinds of forks. The typically better style is called a cartridge fork, and a cartridge is basically a long, skinny shock absorber suspended inside of the front fork. But for decades and decades, there was a venerable little part called the damper rod, and this little trumpet-shaped device has been in the bottom of motorcycle forks for decades and decades and decades and decades. So. These type of forks are typically very, very crude and very, very inexpensive, and the damping in them works very, very poorly. So any improvement you can make to this type of forks is also normally very dramatic to the riders. So let me kind of show you what this might look like. People think I've been picking on Hondas, but this is an example of a Harley-Davidson Softail fork. Harley's only had a couple of basic models of forks on their bikes for probably 30 years or more. They're 41 millimeter Showa conventional forks, and with just a pair of damper rods in them. So the damper rod is situated down here in the bottom of the fork. You can kind of see its location here on the fork. And what happens is, as the fork compresses, oil in this area is forced in through these holes and up through this rod. These holes are the restriction that generates compression damping or bump resistance, okay? Then in between the bottom of the fork and the top of the damper rod is where rebound damping is created. So as the fork extends, it squishes the oil in that area, and that's where the resistance is obtained for the extension of the fork or a rebound. Now, so this is extremely crude. So what are some of the problems and deficiencies of this? Come on in here and I'll show you. So the problem with this style of damping is it's just holes. And holes, you get one single damping curve, and it's always a progressive damping curve. It's velocity squared styled dampening. So the faster you move the oil, you'll get an exponential amount of damping force. Now, the problem is the size of the hole. So if the hole is very small, the bike will feel firm because it's resisting the flow of oil. And so that might be good for the feedback the rider gets, low brake dive, and kind of a firmness and solid platform control. But then anytime the bike hits a bump, it can't force oil through the hole, and so the wheel will just hit the bump and skip over it, won't absorb the bump. The opposite then is you take the damper rods out and make bigger holes in them, nice big holes. So if you have nice big holes, you can hit huge bumps, no problem. The wheel will roll right over the bump, soak the bump, rider won't feel anything. However, the bike just floats constantly because it has no low speed control. And when we talk about low speed, we're talking about the speed of the wheel moving up and down, not the speed of the bike moving forward. So to clarify that, two basic types of compression damping people talk about are high-speed compression and low-speed compression. Low-speed compression is slow-moving events of the fork. So for high-speed, think of if you laid a 2x4 in the parking lot and ran over a 2x4, the square edge of the 2x4 will spike the wheel up. That's a high-speed compression event, even though you're going 5 miles an hour. The low-speed events are your general feel of the stability of the bike and the kind of general control of the bike, braking, that kind of stuff, mid-corner stability, that kind of thing. So these rods are limited. The other option you have is to change the viscosity of the oil. So you can put thicker oil in the fork and you get more damping. You can put thinner oil in the fork and you get less damping. The problem with the general type of damper rod is that the oil has to be pretty thick. The thicker the oil is, the more sensitive it is to temperature variation. So by the time you're using a fork that has around 20 weight fork oil, temperatures below 50 degrees, they start to slow down, and below 40, they get really, really slow. Above 90 degrees, they go away. They just turn into pogo sticks. So this type of damping is extremely crude. So this led to the advent of the cartridge fork. There needed to be a better way to do it, and that's what sort of spurned on the cartridge fork. But now there's still, like I said, millions and millions of bikes produced to this day, brand new 2019 models that have damper rods in the forks. You'll typically find this style of damping in bikes in the, sub $6,000 range. Almost guaranteed they'll have damper rods in them. So now, so to improve this, we mentioned you could send it to a suspension shop and they might make the holes bigger or smaller, but that's not really been a very good way to do it. So you can kind of see there might be different ways of putting holes into the damper rod there. You might have more holes, different diameters, but all that, those holes are only related to compression damping, all right? The other problem with changing the oil viscosity is you affect both compression and rebound together. So then there's a couple of companies that made a little product that's like a blow-off valve. And so this one is called a cartridge fork emulator made by Racetech, and the idea behind it was it has a little hole, a hole much smaller than you would ever make in a damper rod, but then if you hit a bump, it blows off. I don't know if you can see, but this hat blows open, and then there's a giant hole underneath the hat. That's a bigger hole than you would put in the fork. So this kind of gives you a more low-speed control and a general better feeling out of the fork, and then it still has the ability to soak bumps. Again, this is better than the damping rod. Still crude, but these work pretty good, and they're reasonably priced compared to retrofitting your bike with a cartridge fork of some nature. In a cartridge-styled fork, you actually have really nice, sophisticated valving systems with nicely detailed pistons, and damping is controlled by shims that are on top of it, sort of like reed valves from the old days, if you will. So oil is pushed through a port, and these metal discs flex away. The tension on the disc creates resistance. So in a cartridge, the valve in the bottom is a compression valve most of the time, and the valve on the rod is the rebound damping piston and mechanism most of the time. So this type of damping, if you could find some way to get it into a damper rod fork, short of buying a whole aftermarket cartridge kit, which is typically really expensive, $1,200 to $1,500 installed, it would be nice if we could get some sort of an improvement in that. So years ago, the first thing we did here at Traxxion Dynamics, we started manufacturing our own rod. So whereas these are stamped steel, our rods were CNC machined, we could make the tolerance tighter so that you could run thinner oil. And then all of the sort of drilling and brazing and deburring that you might normally do to install one of those blow-off valves, we did at our shop, and so that this was basically kind of a drop-in component. So that improved it, but it was primarily a convenience because then you didn't need any tools other than the tools to take a fork apart. And but it did improve the action of the fork to some extent, but not in the way I wished we could always do something. So my idea was, I would always wanted to try and find a way to put a proper compression valve assembly into a damper rod, and that's been my idea for some time. And so recently we decided to do that. So we're introducing what we're calling our AR-25 action rod, and so this is our a CNC machined rod, and then it's specially fitted with an actual complete functioning 25 millimeter Traxxion Dynamics action valve assembly from a cartridge fork. So with deflecting washers and the whole nine. So this is, as you know, these type of parts that we manufacture have been on the front row of AMA professional road racing, you know, many times. And but now we've packaged that into a damper rod so that now you can get that level of performance, at least on the compression stroke, out of a damper rod fork. So we're making these parts, these rods, in an array of sizes for all kinds of popular motorcycle applications. And in the sport bike world, it's the R3, FZ07, SV650, EX650, CB500, Ninja 400, Triumphs. There's a whole mess. If you've got a 41 millimeter or larger damper rod fork, we'll have a rod for it. And then the other huge place that we're offering in this is into the Harley-Davidson market. So there's millions of 41 millimeter Harley forks out on the roads, and this kit will drop right in. And then on the new Harley forks, the ones that are larger diameter, we've also made kits for that. So we have them in several lengths and such. We can offer low ring options for Harley people, which is pretty popular with Harley people. So this kit can be consumer installed, no problem. It's going to come as a complete kit in a box. It looks something just like this. Inside it will be a pair of our AR-25 Axxion rods, springs suited to your weight and intended use, pre-cut preload spacers, and appropriate oil and weight that we have, and then some basic instructions for installation. So anyway, that's our new product we've been waiting to come up with for a few years, and now we've done it. So if you know anybody that's riding a damper rod styled forked bike and is looking for an affordable upgrade, oh, by the way, it's $399.95. So very affordable, extremely affordable, especially when compared to the next option, which is like I said, cartridge kits, which are always over $1,000, typically around $1,500 installed. So and you might see around $200 if you don't want to do the installation yourself, for them to be professionally built at a suspension shop. But any motorcycle shop can do this, and if you're a handy do-it-yourselfer, you can do this yourself at home as well. So that's our kit. Check it out and let your friends know. We'd appreciate it.